Peace and blessings, everybody. What it is, I'm Novocaine Omega, aka Black Girl Gamer, and welcome to the Black Watch Review. So here, I talk about things that we've seen, things we haven't seen, movies we like, movies we don't like, TV, whatever we feel like talking about. So let's get into it. Today we're going to talk about Coherence. Coherence came out in 2013 and was recommended to me by ChatGPT. I was telling AI, listen, I'm in the mood to watch something different. I like these kind of movies. I like these kind of shows. What do you recommend? Immediately, several times, AI recommended this movie, Coherence. This review will contain spoilers, so fair warning. And this is the kind of movie that you really don't want spoiled for you. If you're going to get into it, you need to go in knowing as little as possible. So if you haven't seen it yet, or if you don't know anything about it, I really suggest that you stop this right now and go ahead and watch it and then come back. Don't watch the trailer. Don't read the synopsis. Just press play and let the movie happen. And then once you've seen it, it'll be better to come back and talk about it. So let's get into it. Written and directed by James Ward Bierkit. Sorry if I'm saying that wrong. Coherence was produced by Bellanova Films and Ugly Duckling Films. Bierkit is probably best known outside of Coherence for his work as a storyboard artist and creative contributor on major projects like Pirates of the Caribbean, The Curse of the Black Pearl, Rango, and The Ring. Coherence was his feature directorial debut, and it's honestly one of the strongest examples of a filmmaker proving that creativity and execution can sometimes matter more than budget. The movie was made on a very tiny, small budget, but Bierkit and his team managed to create one of the most inventive science fiction thrillers of the 2010s. So the film has 8 main characters, but I would say probably the most major character is Emily Baldoni's character. She plays a character called M, and we start the movie off with her, and we kind of end the movie with her. So I would say that if I had to pick a main character, it would be her, even though everybody in the film is important. So let's get into it. I love movies that prove you don't need hundreds of millions of dollars and a warehouse full of CGI artists to create something memorable. Sometimes all you need is a strong concept, good writing, filmmakers who understand how to squeeze every drop out of what they have. This is exactly what made me curious about Coherence. The premise sounded like the kind of science fiction story that could either be brilliant or completely collapse under its own complexity. Alternate realities, doppelgangers, and questions about identity are ideas that can get real messy real quick. Luckily, Coherence mostly manages to keep its balance. Mostly. I'm going to give you a spoiler-free first impression, and then I'm going to spoil the shit out of this movie. So if you don't want that, then after this part, you're going to have to leave the room. First impression, spoiler-free. Coherence is absolutely worth watching if you enjoy psychological science fiction, mystery thrillers, and movies that make you think after the credits roll. This is not a big budget spectacle. Don't go into this expecting explosions and futuristic technology or massive visual effects. The movie is much more interested in ideas, conversations, and slowly building a feeling that something is off. The biggest strength of Coherence is how much it accomplishes with so little. The entire movie takes place during one dinner party, yet it creates a surprisingly large sense of scale. It turns a simple house into a playground for paranoia, confusion, and existential questions. That being said, this movie is not for everybody. If you need everything explained clearly, tied together neatly, and handed to you with a bow on top, this might frustrate you. Coherence wants you to participate. It wants you to question things and rewind moments in your head and put pieces together for yourself. For me, that works more often than it doesn't. This movie does a pretty good job. It does fail in some places, which we'll get into. That being said, it's spoiler time. So if you don't want to know anything, I'm going to have the valet bring your car around and the coat check girl has your coat. Peace and blessings, and we'll see you on the other side. So let's talk about the story first. So the story of Coherence is one of those concepts that sounds simple when you explain it, but becomes increasingly complicated the deeper you go. A group of friends gather for a dinner party on the night a comet passes close to Earth. After strange events begin occurring, they discover that something impossible is happening. Multiple versions of reality appear to be overlapping. Different versions of themselves exist in different timelines, and the characters slowly begin encountering alternate versions of their friends and themselves, and eventually, shit goes crazy. The movie's biggest accomplishment is that it does introduce an extremely complicated idea without relying on massive exposition dumps. Instead of stopping everything so someone can explain the science behind what's happening, the movie lets the audience experience the confusion alongside the characters. That choice works because the characters are just as lost as we are. The first 30 minutes are especially strong because the movie takes its time. The tension comes from small things, weird conversations, strange reactions, people noticing details that don't quite add up. There's a constant feeling that something is slightly wrong. The screenplay understands that uncertainty can often be more frightening than knowing. Once the central concept is revealed, the movie becomes a puzzle box. Sometimes that is incredibly satisfying. Other times it becomes a little exhausting because the audience is spending so much energy trying to understand the rules of this universe that some emotional moments do lose their impact. My biggest story issue is character logic. The movie repeatedly needs characters to leave the safety of the house so that they can interact with these different versions of reality. And that's cool, but the problem is that after everything that happens, some of these decisions feel less like something real people would do and more like the screenplay kind of moving pieces around on a chessboard. Hugh's decision to leave early makes sense. He's like, hey, my brother said give him a call if anything went crazy. Things are going crazy and I need to find a way to get to a phone. Okay, great. But after that, I don't know. At a certain point, after realizing something seriously strange is happening, I think most people in this situation would probably lock the doors, turn off the lights, and collectively agree that nobody is going nowhere. The movie needs these choices to happen, but sometimes you can feel that the writers are kind of pushing characters into position instead of naturally letting them do what they would do and piggybacking off that. Visually, Coherence is interesting because the filmmaking style supports the story instead of fighting against it. The story has a very handheld, almost documentary-like appearance. At first, I wasn't sure how I felt about that. The camera movement can feel rough, and it definitely does not have the polished look of a traditional Hollywood production. Eventually, though, I realized that style was just a part of the movie's identity, and it didn't bother me as much. The handheld cinematography makes the dinner party feel real. It creates the feeling that you are actually sitting in the room with these people watching these events unfold. That realism is important because the movie's entire concept depends on making something impossible feel believable. The production design is intentionally ordinary. The house does not feel like a movie set. It feels like someone's actual home. That normal environment makes the strange events more effective because the movie starts from a place of familiarity before slowly breaking reality completely apart. Next, let's talk about the performances. The performances are one of the biggest reasons Coherence works. This cast feels like a group of actual friends instead of actors delivering lines for a science fiction movie. Emily Baldoni gives the film its emotional center as M. Her performance works because she reacts like a normal person would react when reality starts becoming weird as hell. She's confused, scared, suspicious, and trying desperately to understand what's happening. Maurice Sterling, known for his role as Max Piotrowski on Homeland, brings a grounded energy to the character Kevin. Nicholas Brendon, best known as Xander Harris from Buffy the Vampire Slayer, gives Mike an interesting balance of humor and unpredictability. He's the kind of character where you're never completely sure what he might do next. The rest of the ensemble, including Hugo Armstrong, Lorene Scafaria, Elizabeth Grayson, Alex Manoogian, and Lauren Mayer, all contribute to making the group dynamically believable. A major reason the movie works is because the chemistry feels very natural. The characters annoy each other, they interrupt each other, they obviously have history, they have awkward conversations, and they feel like real people. They actually seem like longtime friends, and that is important to make this movie work. That makes the science fiction element hit harder when things start going crazy. Underneath all the alternate realities and science fiction concepts, Coherence is really about identity, regret, and the terrifying question of whether we are actually happy with the lives that we choose. The movie asks what happens when you're confronted with a version of yourself who made different decisions. Would you still believe your life is the right one? Would you trade places? Would you become someone else if you thought that version of yourself had something better going on? Those questions are what give the movie staying power. The alternate realities are not interesting because of the science behind them. They are interesting because they force the characters to confront their own insecurities. Everyone has a version of themselves they wonder about. The movie takes that very human curiosity and turns it into a nightmare. Now let's talk about the soundscape of this movie. The sound design in Coherence is one of the more interesting parts of the movie because it follows the same philosophy as the visuals, realism over polish. The score, composed by Kristen Orn-Derud, is extremely minimal. Honestly, it's one of those scores where you almost forget it's there, and I think that works. This is not a movie driven by huge musical identity, as opposed to productions like Sinners or Star Wars, where obviously the music plays a huge role in how we feel at any given moment, and even might feel like a character in and of itself. This movie isn't like that. The music in this movie exists mostly to add atmosphere and a subtle sense of unease. It creates that feeling that something strange is happening underneath the surface. But the real star of the soundscape is the naturalistic audio. The movie sounds like people in a room, like how people actually sound in a room when you're talking to them. Voices have natural echoes, conversations overlap. You hear the environment around the characters. It does not have that overly cleaned up Hollywood dialogue where every word sounds like it was recorded in a perfect studio booth. And if someone told me Coherence was filmed entirely on iPhones, I would be like, yep, that clocks. I don't mean that to be an insult. I think that realism is intentional. The filmmakers could have used ADR, which is when actors return later to re-record their dialogue in a studio to create cleaner audio. A lot of productions do this to give the sound team more control. Coherence does not feel like it went that route. Instead, the audio feels like you are physically present in the house with these people in real time. You hear them the way you would hear your own friends talking in an actual space. That choice strengthens the movie because the more realistic the environment feels, the more unsettling it becomes when reality itself starts breaking. Sound is also used as a storytelling device. The movie repeatedly uses noises like knocks, breaking glass, and disturbances outside to pull characters into the unknown. These sounds become triggers that push the story forward. The problem is, though, that the movie does rely on this device a little bit too often. The sound of windows breaking especially becomes almost a marker for moving characters into the next stage of the story, and I understand why it's used. It creates reasons for people to go outside and encounter alternate versions of reality, but after a while it starts feeling a little convenient. Overall, though, the sound design fits the movie. It's not flashy, it's not trying to impress you. It's trying to make you feel like you're trapped inside that house with everyone else, and it succeeds. Where the movie hits and where it misses. As far as where I thought the movie was on point, the concept, the idea behind Coherence is fantastic, and the movie understands that that concept matters more than the spectacle. The atmosphere. The movie creates tension through conversations, uncertainty, and small details instead of relying on constant action. The performances, the natural chemistry between the cast makes the entire experience believable. The filmmaking approach. This is a perfect example of a low-budget movie using its limitations as a strength. So now let's talk about places where I don't think this movie hit its mark all the way. Some character decisions feel forced. The movie occasionally requires people to make choices that do not feel completely realistic just to move the story forward, and I don't like that. So the movie also can be a bit too confusing. It's not terrible, I've seen worse. Westworld. Westworld was one of the most confusing things I've ever watched. You have to be an existentialist to even begin to unpack some of the stuff that was happening in Westworld. However, Westworld was exciting and beautiful and innovative and crafty, especially in its first 2 seasons. And so we wanted to sit through the confusion because we were invested in Westworld. This movie doesn't quite have that impact, and so they do run the risk of kind of losing you a little bit in places, but I do think they reel it in well as the movie progresses. Now let's talk about the payoff. With mystery films like this, you want the payoff to really reward your patience, and I don't think they took it far enough. I know this is going to make me sound morbid, but I wanted to see more people die. I'm not even going to hold you. My thirst for blood wasn't because I enjoy gore for the sake of gore. I actually really don't. What I do enjoy is when a story delivers on the promises that it made to the audience. Earlier in the film, M tells the story about the woman who murdered her husband during a previous Comet event. Okay, cool story, but that's not just an interesting anecdote. It's foreshadowing. The movie is planting the idea that these strange cosmic events can push ordinary people toward bloody violence. Then the screenplay doubles down on that idea with Mike. Mike starts talking about whether he should kill everyone's doppelgangers, including his own. He literally warns the group that if he starts drinking, he'll become pretty much Killer Mike. And then he starts drinking like a lot, bottle after bottle, like knocking them back. At that point, I'm sitting here thinking, okay, somebody about to lose it. Instead, Mike stays surprisingly calm for almost the entire rest of the movie. There is a confrontation where alternate Mike attacks our Mike, but even that feels relatively restrained considering how much tension the movie had been building. For me, that was a weak payoff. I actually think they were kind of playing with us here. The movie wants us to believe that Mike is the one that's going to go off and become the biggest threat in the room, only to eventually reveal that M is the one everybody needs to worry about, right? Looking back, I think that's a smart narrative fake out. I just wish the movie had let the chaos breathe a little longer before pulling that switch. The film repeatedly hints that any of these characters could become a monster under the right circumstances, or even that their doppelgangers might be monsters. I wanted to see at least one timeline where that idea completely exploded. Not because I wanted buckets of blood, but because the screenplay itself kept loading the gun, and then it never quite pulled the trigger. I also think the storyline involving Mike and Hugh's wife cheating across multiple realities deserved a much bigger payoff. That's the kind of revelation that should completely destroy relationships and send emotions through the roof. The film hints at that emotional chaos, but never fully embraces it. None of this ruins the movie for me, though. It's more that Coherence spends so much time teasing the psychological collapse of this friend group that I expected the ending to push those ideas just a little bit further than it ultimately does. Since its release, Coherence has developed a strong cult following among science fiction fans. The movie is often praised for its originality, clever writing, and ability to create a massive concept with extremely limited resources. Some viewers love the puzzle box structure, others find the ambiguity frustrating. Honestly, I do understand both sides. A movie like this asks a lot from the audience, and depending on your tolerance for uncertainty, that can either be the best part or the biggest problem for you. Regardless, Coherence has earned its reputation as one of the more memorable independent science fiction films of the 2010s. Coherence is exactly the kind of movie that reminds you that creativity will always matter more than budget. It's clever, it's original, it's ambitious. It does not always stick the landing perfectly, but the ideas are so strong that the movie remains fascinating even when it stumbles. I'm honestly still torn over whether I would watch it again. Part of me wants to revisit it now that I know what's happening and catch all the little clues I missed. But another part of me is not sure I care enough about every detail to spend another night pulling apart every thread. Either way, I'm glad I watched it. So if you like psychological science fiction, alternate reality stories, mystery thrillers, movies that make you think after they end, and low budget films with big ideas, this is your jam. Skip it though if you don't like ambiguous endings, slow burn storytelling, movies that require audience participation, stories that do not explain every detail. My final score, 7.5 out of 10. All right, y'all make sure y'all subscribe, click the like button and all that other stuff. Tell a friend, and I'll catch you next time on the Black Watch Review. Peace.